kid or a teacher
Cafeteria,
who's
gym.
overheated, which happens
Right.
every year, is there a place for them to cool off
Right.
without sitting in their car?
Yeah.
So, that doesn't have to be specific to the bond, but as we look at the big picture, is there a way to kind of on the side build that in? Perhaps looking at Siwanoy, and then maybe the library's not enough at Colonial, maybe it's one more spot, but just looking at those two buildings on like a really small scale with that purpose in mind.
December 5,
Just throwing that out.
2017.
So with Siwanoy, where do we want to put the urgency?
Pelham, New York is discussing what they're going to put into
I'm not hearing high,
No.
or if they're going
so it's a medium or a low.
capital projects.
Because I think you can put M/L because it's academic, but I don't think we're doing it.
Got it. Okay, that will go in the long-term plan. Okay, which brings us back to Prospect Hill. And back to where we started last time and need to come back to with seriousness, urgency. I know one of the questions that came up from last time was there space that could be reconfigured? So I was over there this week. Jim and Anthony actually were also, took a trip over to Prospect Hill. And it's a judgment call. There is potentially space where some of these larger rooms, I don't know, north, south, east, and west, which corner of the building that is.
Talking about the rooms with the bay windows.
Northwest.
Bay windows, yeah. There's one area with bay windows that's just above the main office. It's not that portion, it's the other
The northwest. We're
Thank
saying
you.
northwest.
northwest area. It has 3 floors. There's rooms at each level that are basically very large rooms that have been carved. There's been space in each one carved out for some related services. So we did look at those. If you were to break out those spaces completely back down to the main rooms, about 1,100 square feet at 2 of the levels. So there is a potential to reconfigure. You would have to, it's almost like railroad apartments. They're long and skinny with one access to the hallway. So whereas you could subdivide them into, divide into 2 classrooms, you'd need to build some kind of hallway egress, which would take away a little bit of the square footage. They'd also be a little oddly shaped in some cases. And I think approximately they'd be about 500 square feet each, which is not unheard of in our district, but it's definitely on the smaller side. If you remember the tour of Hutchinson, basement classroom with a fireplace in it.
Yes.
That's 508
That's 500
square,
square
that's
feet.
508. So it'd be basically that size. But again, it may not be a nice square, but it would be that square footage that you could divide those into. Then you'd have to relocate basically 4 related service spaces to somewhere else in the building.
And this is with our architect's opinion on this?
No, this
Okay.
is with our in-house expertise
Okay.
that we were looking at. And again, just measuring square footage and, quick
They're
and
big
dirty
rooms, but it's
analysis.
just not great. It's not easy space to divide. It'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't know if you
see
wanted to
how
speak a
can
little bit
decide.
more to it.
Again, they are big. They are big spaces right now. Some of them have been subdivided for other occupational therapy use and different office
Yeah,
uses.
OT, PT,
AIS.
FLES, ESL.
We've got computer racks in one of the
Server
rooms as
room.
well.
Yeah.
So how you divide them would be interesting, and I think that's something you would want the architect to look at and provide some sort of schematic to make sure you're within code. Obviously, it's a real, again, it's very
That's where it might
interesting
be some
how
challenges.
you'd want to divide it. But you're right, they're nice. They're really nice rooms. They're very nice size rooms.
And were you able to look at the space again with the eye of possibly moving some of the administration to, if we were to do an addition?
If we were to do, something like that, there would not be.
In the downstairs, though?
No,
I'm saying,
this would be
when you went back to the building, were you able to look at the downstairs classrooms again if you?
I wasn't looking at it through that lens. I
Okay.
was looking at, could we reconfigure current space?
Okay.
So if we were to reconfigure with what's there, that wouldn't create any new space for offices. And I haven't gotten the numbers back from Russ specific to it, but if we were to add a classroom wing Then you could, I think the prices he'd given us were on 3 classrooms. So we have music on a cart right now. You could either pull 2 classrooms up from the basement area, so that would probably be the 2nd grade class, and maybe, I think there's a kindergarten, and you could move TSP down into a larger room, something like that, to alleviate, to open up those rooms, or you could reserve one of those rooms, one of the new spaces for when we go up a section 3 years down the road. Probably by the time it's built, you'd need it for the increased section. So it would gain you some space. It's just not enough for all of central office, but you could probably put at least one department there. Like, I think the business department is kind of a self-contained little group of happy
One
folks.
happy pod.
Cohesive,
Happy campers.
hardworking, happy campers. I'm confident we could relocate a portion
Okay.
of central office to that space. And it would be basement level, and there is an exterior entrance, which could assist us in some of what Russ was speaking to last time about trying to make sure that the traffic flow doesn't commingle with the school.
So if we did that, if we added in the classrooms, that would be 3.4, but that would also trigger the accessibility, so that would also be 6.4.
Correct.
And then we'd have to make a decision about the multipurpose room as well.
Yeah, and I know last time we had rated the multi-purposes and the mediums, so not necessarily making top priority. Certainly, you'd get a more economical price, but it would still cost you more no matter what if you were to put the multi-purpose in.
What I'd like to get a sense is the functionality of doing a reconfiguration by our architect and the cost of the architect versus the cost of the full cost of doing the expansion, just so we have a sense of.
I can see if they can do that. I do think Jim alluded to one problem we may run into.
I'm sorry.
I don't believe 500 square feet is up
It's
to.
adequate, right?
And that's what they think. So I guess I wanted to confirm that that would be their assessment, that there's not a way to configure this in a different way.
Okay. We can have them look.
No, if you don't,
Yeah. I'm not an expert, to be fair, we can ask the questions. I'm gauging from all of our prior conversations that we may have some problems around that.
Yeah, I mean, we were looking at access. Access to the room is difficult just because the restroom is adjacent, so you're kind of blocked out on
You're
one
limited
side.
on
So
access to
it
entrance.
was tough to gain access to. If you divide it into 2, how your access looks, and it's almost like a flagpole. You would have one hallway getting to the back room, and you effectively lose some space with that.
These are the classrooms that already have a little ante-room when you walk in.
They do.
They do,
Yes.
right. So they have a small ante-room, and then you kind of turn into the main classroom, and there's big bay windows around on the sides, right?
On the 2 floors.
Yeah, okay.
I would not be in favor of creating tiny classrooms. I guess what I'm just
No.
wondering is architects look at space very even from professionals who deal with this. They look at this space very differently. They might look at a different spot of the building and say, okay, well, you could do this. I never would have thought that we could have converted your office space at the classrooms to the high school. So I'm just. It seems to me that we have an obligation to explore whether there's a feasible. By feasible, I mean a solution that provides adequate classroom space that's appropriate for our students within the current building.
Yeah.
Did you say that that space that you've identified, right now, it's all used for related services? Or there is
No,
a class?
there's a class, and there's 3 different levels with these large rooms. There's a class at each level, regular class, 5th grade, kindergarten, and I forget what's on the middle, on the first level.
It used to be a
Rosemary
3rd
might
grade,
know.
but.
Yes, it's
yeah.
probably, let's say, kindergarten, 3rd, 5th, for the sake of argument. And then within each of those, there's also additional related spaces carved out. There's OTPT on the end of one, AIS on the other end, I think. In one, it's shared space with ESL and FLES. And AIS is also in that same space. And then in the 3rd level, it's a server room, which is the server room for the building. There's not a lot of flexibility around that. So, yeah.
And where would those related services go? We would have to find a place
So
for
you'd
that.
have to, yeah. One possible solution could be if we were to divide 2 levels instead of being the one main room, but they ever divide 2 at each of those large areas into 2 classrooms at 2 different levels, we basically would gain 2 classrooms. You could take what's currently the second grade classroom, the one that was added at the last minute in the summer. Basement room, used to be the music room, it's now second grade. They could feasibly move up, which you could put probably, Anthony and I look, we'd have to again look at what the codes are, but anywhere from maybe 2 to 4 of those spaces relocated there. There's also a resource room that's about 440 square feet. It's a carved out part of another kindergarten room that could maybe be subdivided into to be a shared space between two. So I mean, it's really doing what we've been doing all along, is doing the best we can with what we have. It would be, like I said, approximately 500 square feet. The other piece, and Jim brought this up when we were speaking earlier, probably some of the, and this is where I think the architects would help us, the room configurations are not nice, neat squares, too, because you've got the bay windows, you've got windows in off-center places, so you might wind up with a 400, 600, or, you know, you'd have to do some configuration around some of the windows to subdivide those areas. So square feet are one thing, usable square feet, I think, would be a challenge, but again, you know, we make things work. That's what we do. So I can see what they can do.
I see an expansion at Prospect Hill solving a lot of issues that we have. We have a capacity issue there. We have a capacity issue at the middle school, high school, which is why we're hoping to move you guys out.
You guys hear me now?
If
You hear me now?
some of the offices could go to Prospect, and Rosemary had mentioned last week,
Guys, let me know
perhaps,
if you're watching.
even if it meant
Darren,
adding a classroom instead of adding
Amy, let me know if you can hear me now.
the special class from Colonial
Okay, that's
to
better.
the
Good.
new Hutchinson building, which might take longer to implement, taking longer to solve for some of the crowding at Colonial. If you could add that to an expansion at Prospect, perhaps in shorter order, I don't know
Okay.
that for certain, but
Okay, so what these guys are talking
that
about.
solves some
Yeah.
issues at Colonial as well, so
and I
it's
know
sort
we get
of,
people coming
to
in
me,
here
like a
with different
three-pronged
levels of
benefit.
experience and
We do
interest.
have a couple
And we
years.
have
But regularly
there.
talk with my internet channel where
We
I
do have
talk
a
about
couple
how
years
politics and
before
government
that
impact
section
people's
is
lives.
going to
This is
happen.
the Board of
There would be
Education in
time for
Pelham, New
construction.
York, and these guys are talking
At
about
Prospect.
possibly doing a whole bunch of capital improvements to the building plant in the district and what's going to cost and whether or not to present that to
But
voters.
yeah, you could have the increased section, the class, so that you could put music back in a classroom, and the idea of bringing a special education program over, something like that.
All right.
And
So they're talking.
And maybe
in that case, you may not free as much space. If you moved a special education program over,
This is
you
key.
wouldn't free up as much room for office space, but
So that's with the wing.
with the wing added with 3 classrooms.
So the issue that they're juggling here, is they have, you know, a confined set of spaces that they have to work with. They're trying to find enough space to provide an office space for administrators, but also to accommodate all of the special ed requirements of the district. So what they're discussing right now is possibly relocating some special ed classes.
We should be going. I was trying to follow the discussion about what to do with that line of classrooms, but I really don't see the value in spending money on that when it's not really going to solve our potential issues. If it would be something that's going to, along with the expansion, make the school even more flexible, then yes, but if it's just something that's a stopgap, I think we have to be very careful with the amount of money that we're spending, given the changes in the world that we just, will probably be happening, but also just as a matter of fiscal prudence.
This is key.
If we're not solving the problem in a really constructive way, or something that's going to add value when we do what needs to be done, which I think there is to add the wing with the 3 classrooms, I don't think we should be looking at doing the work inside.
And with the 3 classrooms, just remind me from the capacity perspective, with the 3 classrooms in the addition version, be used to address purely Prospect overflow?
They could.
They wouldn't have to be.
They really could.
There's some flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess because I think we've talked about this before, because I think it's one thing to say, if we think we need 3 classrooms at Prospect, I thought it was less than that, but if we thought we needed 3,
It's
then,
two. It's 2 for sure.
okay, so if, all right, so maybe there's, so you don't underbuild, okay, that's fine,
Right,
so
third is the
3.
optional.
But this would not be designed to address capacity anywhere else in the district. This would be really designed to,
And that's where you could choose either, I guess the way I'm seeing is you could choose to bring another basement class up, which would
Right.
address Prospect. and
no, I'm saying, I'm just
better
asking outside, I got that we could use it there.
Or you could bring, as Jessica suggested, maybe a special education class over from another building.
From Colonial, let's go.
So again, not really, which would, if we were able to bring the Colonial class that we've talked about bringing to Hutchinson, from able to bring into Prospect sooner, that could alleviate capacity for Colonial
Sooner than
potentially
if you waited
sooner than
for-
Hutchinson.
All right, so let me try to
And
give
under
a
this plan,
nutshell
you
of
would
what I
just,
think
you
is going
wouldn't
on here. There are
address
capacity
the
issues. There are 4
multipurpose room, you
elementary
would just do
schools
the
in
3
school district.
classrooms, and the
And there
ADA,
are capacity issues
would it be
that
constructed in a way
Board of
that it could be
Education is
added to
trying to grapple
easily?
with. So they're trying to
So
figure out,
the way
well,
that
if we
building
add
is
3
laid
classrooms
out,
here,
it
can we
very
move
much
kids from
lends
here to
itself
here?
to
If we move, if
each
we
of
make
those
space for
spaces.
administrators, and will that free up space
I
for
think
special
it
ed
would.
classes over here? So
Part
they're
of, and I
kind of
think, I
juggling
remember
the
back
whole
to
thing.
Rush
Now, the
last
gentleman
time,
with the glasses who
initial
was speaking a minute
proposal
ago,
on classroom-
his name is
classroom
Tom
was
Imparato. I
2.1.
met him. He
And
was
then when he came
a
back
school
with
board
it
member.
on its own, it was
And
3.4.
what he was
And
alluding
the
to
difference was
was,
because
not a
without
trivial
the
matter. What he was alluding to was
You have to
the
now
Congress is
construct a
passing
corridor.
this
that
massive
put the
tax plan
multi-purpose
that's
on,
wildly
corridor would have
unpopular
been
and is
included.
really going to impact
So is it pending
blue
class and
states
power
like New
foolish
York
not to
adversely because there's some
multi-purpose?
diminution in
If
the
you're-
mortgage
if
interest
you're
deduction,
going
and there's
That's
probably
the-
going to be
that's the
some
challenge. The
reduction
initial
in the
proposal
deductibility
from
of state and
July
local
was
taxes. So that's what he's
between
alluding to.
8.7 to 9.7 for a multi-purpose room and elevator. And, yeah, multi-purpose room with the elevator accessibility features. Did not have the bathrooms included. And at that point, the additional 3 classroom wing was 2.1 million. So 9 plus 2.1 plus some bathroom work is,
And is there any opportunity to add more than 3 classrooms to Prospect? How much would that cost? I know we keep talking about possibilities to adding
They
new
would-
to the new building, but
right, they
I'm
would be
thinking about.
designed, it would, he said that you could design it to go up to 3 floors, which would actually match the other side of the building.
Right, so this first wing would be 1 level,
Right,
and that's why you're getting only 3 classrooms out of it?
correct,
Okay.
right.
It's,
But Jess, were you asking about doing it now or doing it in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about like classrooms last week over multi-purpose spaces. I'm almost wondering, want to do each of these things well, but within reason. And I'm just wondering does it make, I can see the rationale of obviously the capacity, the added class, the music on a cart, putting that back in a classroom, easing up Colonial with that 1 class perhaps sooner, but you still have those basement classrooms. So I'm just wondering, does it make sense to add more classrooms? I'd be inclined not to spend the money on the multi-purpose space because that building has an auditorium and it's not perfect, but they're so much further along in that way. Maybe the economies of scale don't add up, but that multi-purpose room costs a lot, but I'd almost be more inclined to spend that kind of money on a few more classrooms and just really address capacity.
and I
there.
think we're all kind of saying the same thing, but I think that drilling down on that number in terms of the multi-purpose and the economies of scale is going to be really important. So if we're all saying that classrooms and capacity at Prospect, but also in other areas of the district, particularly Colonial, is a high priority, then that is something that I would definitely want to see a lot more information, because it's still not all computing to me,
Yeah.
and I know it's because we've asked for information in different
Yeah.
iterations,
Yes.
and
Great way to
I
put it.
don't think anybody can keep it straight at this point, but
Yeah, and I have the blueprints in front of me, so it's very easy for me to visualize. Right now, like I said, in the basement level, we've got that 2nd grade classroom that used to be the music room. That I think makes sense as a first move. Next to that, you've got the TSP room, which is the smaller room that you remember when we did our tour. Ladder, great. That's another,
What does TSP
I would
stand
say
for?
that would be another one to consider next, as far as trying to find a better spot. You do have the art room at the basement level. It's on the other side of the gymnasium. It has accessed directly from the cafeteria, which is a noise factor. It does not have any windows. The backside is, so that could potentially be a space to consider that could easily become office space. That could be another classroom worth considering for a move up. Other than that, you've got what I think is basement level, Rosemary, and Steve. I think that's kindergarten in the large corner room. In the basement level? Yeah, garden level.
Yeah, I believe so. If not first grade.
Yeah, I think that it's kindergarten or first grade. I'm pretty sure it's kindergarten.
That's a large corner space.
Yes, very large. It's a nice.
And there's one
sizable
upstairs. There's
space.
also one on the.
Right, so you got kindergarten there, it's nice. And again, the basement there is different than some of the other schools because of the pitch of the property. By the time you get to that side of the building, you're no longer below grade as far as windows and ladders and those kinds of things. So that side of the building is not as much in need.
What's that one that's 440 square feet?
I believe that's the resource room. Okay. So that, I think this end room, if I'm thinking of the right floor, basement level, the other corner, is that kindergarten as well?
Not good memory in terms
I
of
feel
where
like she's
people
the
were
very
teaching.
I should have written it down over there today.
So it sounds like there's
Oh, yeah,
two.
no, it is. That's a resource room, which is right next to a kindergarten class, and actually Anthony's folks had reconfigured that. Originally, it was a large kindergarten room on that other corner of the building. You might remember this the teacher was telling me this, so I'm checking my facts with you right now. That originally was a very large, like about 1,100 square foot kindergarten room with adjoining bathrooms that went from one room into the next room. And she said after Sandy Hook, when we were making a lot of changes to facilities to improve security, the pass-through from one room to the other became a concern, so that was blocked off. The room was actually reconfigured, so there's still almost 700 square foot of kindergarten room, but then a resource room was created next to it. So that's 440, not large enough for a class, but suitable for a large, nice, comfortable resource room.
So it sounds like there's two obvious, if you were to go the moving basement classrooms out, there's two obvious classrooms.
Two obvious classrooms.
There's music, and there's the new, if we were just talking Prospect, it sounds like there's 4 classrooms if you wanted to really look at that building.
Two obvious basement ones, music, and one section increase based on demographics.
And if you wanted to move any program from another school, that would be
Additional.
a 5th.
Right. And as I said, if you wanted, you can consider the art room as well, which would open up.
Right, I thought there were 3 obvious ones.
Oh,
These
I
are
was
the two
thinking
ones.
art and TSP when I was thinking of the 2.
Oh,
Is there
sorry, yeah.
another one?
There was the current second grade classroom.
Okay, so that's another
That's, I think, should be probably first priority in there. The
So that
current
would be
second
6.
grade, it used to be music.
Which could go back to being music.
Which could go back to being music, yes.
That's true.
So,
I think that's kind
Art
of a
is a
reasonable
potential.
use for that
Plus
room.
music that's already on the cart, so music's no longer in the room. Yeah, you could there's easily 3 to 4 rooms that could just be justified
what we're
at
saying, I think.
Prospect itself based on enrollment in facilities.
Okay.
Yes.
and so to address capacity, you would also add additional room? I'm just trying to figure out what's the total scope of what, are we talking 3, are we talking
Yeah,
5, are we
but
talking
that's-
6? I mean, what's
That's
the?
really up to the board, how.
I wasn't asking you specifically.
Yeah.
I was just kind of
Okay.
posing the
Yeah.
question. Like, what is it that?
Yeah.
You say 3 to 4 though, including that projected
Yeah. I think,
added
yeah.
section at Prospect is what you were saying, right?
So folks, what they're talking about right now.
Well, no,
That's
that's
what you want to put in it.
That's what I was thinking. This classic colonial.
Right, so there's one new section.
All right, so just a quick kind of recap, because I think there's going to be a couple more people coming into the stream here. But basically, this is a Pelham, New York Board of Education, and they're talking about construction projects that they're potentially planning on funding with the borrowing, and they're going over a lot of nitty-gritty details about classrooms and construction projects and capacities and things going on in 6 different buildings. There are 4 elementary schools and 1 middle school and 1 high school. And this woman here at the center is Dr. Cheryl Champ. She's the superintendent of schools, and she's leading this board meeting where the board members are deliberating which projects to do and eventually how much they cost and whether or not to ask voters to approve a bond referendum next May. So let's listen.
of that scale.
Those two, plus the music on a cart that you would put
And
into
go ahead
the
and,
classroom, plus
put messages
the
into the
section
comment
that we
box
know
there
is
so that I
coming
can see,
for.
you know, if you guys have any questions and we can
Right.
discuss
But
whatever's going on
At
here.
what point,
So that lady with the blonde hair, I believe she's the
it
school
does
board
talk
president.
about doing this and moving administrative space there. At what point do we free up space while making sure we have enough for students for administrative offices? Because that is what will alleviate overcrowding in the high school.
And I think that's the balance of what we've got to look at,
Hi,
because
Maurice.
the more we can relocate in a financially responsible way, the less we rent.
Yeah.
And renting might actually make sense.
It might be more reasonable.
It might be more financially feasible and reasonable.
So
You know,
she's
we
talking
looked
about
at
potentially
what it
renting
costs to
space
build
for
office
administrators
space that
rather
had
than
on
using
Hutchinson. It was-
classroom,
Right.
physical spaces that could otherwise be used for classroom purposes.
It's different from flexible space, but to just to ask specifically what it would be to put us all there was.
We certainly wouldn't want to put Prospect in the situation that we put the middle school and high school in by
Exactly.
making this
Right,
decision now,
right.
right? So we
Right.
don't want to
Right.
make the same mistake, you know.
But the other thing is that that's work that Mr. Mandilli's team could do over time, converting the space into office space, and which would save us the rent money, which I think we can only rent, isn't it 5-year terms that has to be approved? And because I seem to remember that when we were on Hillside Avenue, there was a limit on the term that we could be there.
Well, my experience is that government contracts can't encumber you for the long term. Usually it's 3 or 5 year, 3-year deal with 1-year options, but
Yeah.
I tend to think you're in the right ballpark, Tom, as far as the term.
I think
It was the first time I was in that ballpark.
for my own sense of this project, I would need a little more information, particularly if I understood correctly, when we put the addition on at Colonial, it was necessary to displace students during that, and we don't have swing space,
So
it sounds like.
I know we have
So
some parents watching
guess I
here
would
who are Pelham
be
people. How
interested
long
in
ago
knowing
was this
more
colonial
about
edition that she's
timing
talking
of
about?
that
Does anybody know?
project, the
Prospect.
feasibility of running it simultaneously with another major project in the district, and then its impact on student placement. Would it displace students? How many? At what point? As we see the enrollment projection. So that's one question that
Can I
I have.
ask real quick on that? Was the student displacement because of the planned construction, or was it because of issues that went awry during
I
construction?
think it was issues that
I-
went
I'm
awry
pretty sure it was
during-
after the accident.
Right, 'cause that was my impression of that as well, because
I
I've
don't know the
seen
history that they're talking about.
expansion
There
work
was something must have been
conducted where
terribly
they were
wrong
having
at
to
Colonial
displace
Elementary School at some point.
when, and I only, again, I have limited experience, but in Sewanca, we built a whole wing onto a building. Construction went on all during school. The tie-in to the main building happened during the summer.
Right.
So I could see it being something like that, but we can get more information on
And
that.
it may be. I would just want
Yeah.
someone with the expertise to
Yeah.
tell us that.
Yeah, and we can definitely have, Calgy and KG&D here next time as well. I told them tonight, I didn't think we'd get too detailed, but we can
The-
have them here next time.
The other, it's sort of my theme for the night, so sorry if it's boring to hear it again. Just as I was looking at this list, some of the things on our list are obvious specific things, like the HVAC units. That's a thing. And the problem that it's trying to address
I don't know what 8-tracks are. Does
is
anybody know
very
what 8-tracks
clear.
are?
That thing might break, and we need to replace the thing. As I look at our list with respect to Colonial property acquisition, Colonial expansion, Prospect Hill classrooms, I'm not sure. I guess I'm wondering if we honed in on the problem that we're trying to solve. I want to still try to connect the problem that we're trying to solve, and here is what we think is the best solution to that problem. Those three
Folks,
items
it's
on
10
our
minutes to
list
10. These people are
seem
going
to
strong.
be more about trying to, the problem is the capacity. Not necessarily the quality of the space that we've talked in colonial terms specifically. The quality of the outdoor space is certainly a concern. Are we confident that the best way to address capacity at the elementary level is to build expansions on? Or do we think it would be helpful to have some options for thinking about multiple ways of addressing the problem so we could identify what's the best way to solve the problem?
I'm not advocating, by the way, for saying we should reconfigure. I would just like to see what that would look like and what it would cost, because then maybe we come back and we say, gee, you guys, your instincts are 100% right, but I would just like to see the cost for a comparison perspective and see what we get and what we don't get. And are these we're not going to be spending millions of dollars to do something suboptimal. That doesn't strike me as smart. Tom made that point.
You're talking specifically about Prospect.
Prospect.
Or maybe you build a bigger Hutchinson.
Right.
And I recognize that you have to do other things for that to be a feasible solution for elementary, to alleviate capacity pressure across the district. But I would at least want to be able to compare so that as a board we can make the best decision about what seems to best meet that to solve the problem.
So I'll just give you my 2 cents on that. I do see that there could be combined solutions, but I also see them a little bit as 2 unique problems. Prospect having its own capacity issue, which is exactly what we're talking about here, music on a cart and going up one section, and some quality decisions about classroom space. So I think that is in and of itself is an issue. I think it could more easily be solved through expansion than Colonial's problem, because we do have space. The facility lends itself to that. We already have a blueprint from 1929 that gives us, the groundwork.
The blueprint from 1921.
But then there's the quality of it, like the reconfiguration versus expansion and the cost difference and the quality. So I think I see that as almost a self-contained problem and with something that could be solved easily there in and of itself, separate and apart from everything else. Colonial, obviously a much different, same problem, but many more different variables around it because we don't own space to do anything. There's a potential to buy, which is hypothetical at this point in time. The configuration of that building, should we be able to get property, presents additional. It's not quick and easy and, a nice clean place that we already know we can put it. So I think it's a much more complicated construction answer there. Expansion to solve because there's a lot of variables and a lot more complicated design.
These guys are going strong, okay? They've been in there. I was at this meeting at 7:15.
So in my mind, that's the one that
at 10 o'clock, they're still going strong.
Of a complex and solution.
It's like a marathon.
And also because the cost of a new building, we're already beyond our sort of the cap, the aidability cap that you have for that particular building. At Prospect, you would work to be done at Prospect would be aided. You sort of have that VAU for Prospect, right? And you get 40% of that versus adding more to Hutchinson, right?
But if you had greater enrollment,
Let me just kind of level set on what's going on. So, folks, if you tuned in recently, what you're watching is the Board of Education meeting in Pelham, New York. This is the Pelham Board of Education, and there's a massive capital infrastructure project being planned. They're talking about the gory details of space, capacity planning, where to put special ed, where to put administrators. They're really getting into the nit and the grit. And at some point, they're supposed to be making a decision tonight about what to actually put forward to voters. So that's what I'm listening for, and let's check it out.
So, I kind of went back and thought about what are the different ways that we've thought about.
So this lady speaking right now is Dr. Cheryl Champ. She's the superintendent of schools.
Because you're right, that's the heart of this issue. buying property and building on the Colonial. That's one of the ideas clearly that's come to us and that we've talked a lot about, but that's, to me, still the hypothetical until we know that that's a reality. Reconfiguring space at Prospect, we talked about that. Prospect, we talked about.
This is a good recap.
We have a short-term plan for the next 3 years in both buildings, regardless. And this is kind of where I start to go back to thinking about what are the different options, like in a decision analysis. Doing nothing is an option. And working with the space we have and just continuing to make it work is an option. Music on a cart, support services on a cart, that is an option. Not recommending that,
Status
but
quo.
I'm saying that is still a realistic option.
She's laying it out. Status quo is an option.
For the next 3 years.
And remind me when another section comes in Prospect.
I believe it was
put art on a cart.
3 school years from now that would happen. I think it would not be art on a cart because the art room has no windows.
Oh, right.
So you would not be one of them.
Right. So there's a concern here that some of these schools in Pelham don't have like dedicated space for music.
CSP out of their current space, which is under 5.
Some of these schools in Pelham don't have a dedicated location where students can have music classes. So they have what's called music on a cart, where let's see, no matter where I move, I'm not in the camera. But what they're saying is, music on a cart basically is where musical instruments are on a cart and they come into a room where the kids are. So they want to do a little better than that, and they're talking about how to change the capacity configuration of the district.
And that's the way it would be, because it appears that growth will be sustained from that point in time. Doing nothing is an option, and just dealing with what we have. Shifting staff, resident students, that's been balanced all along. We can and will continue to do that separate and aside, but that is something that could help us with small numbers. The community keeps asking about, do we consider rezoning? That's something we would have to look at.
Hang on a second,
I know
Victor.
it's not a
I'm
popular
going to answer your question.
conversation. It's not a comfortable conversation. I know there's no desire to change the rules or to go and change, for our current residents where they are, because they bought their homes where they did for their local schools.
Redistricting.
But that is something that could be explored in more depth. Moving some special education programs, we've talked about that as well, whether it's Colonial to Hutchinson, Colonial to Prospect, Colonial to Siwano. There's some movement there. We could make multiple moves in that regard, but I know there's no will. We're not talking about putting all special education in one building. Make that very clear.
We're clear.
But we could explore that a little further. Some schools do optional zones. We could allow what's been mentioned before, maybe Colonial families to opt into Siwanoy or Hutchinson. There's precedent for that. Creating a magnet program.
Hang on, Victor, I haven't forgotten about you. I promise I'm going to answer your question.
And then building a bigger Hutchinson school to then look at whether it was optional or rezoning or whatever. Those are all the ideas that I remember that had kind of come up to us. We could have a more extensive conversation about that.
All right.
If you want to do that next
if
time.
you're going to build a bigger Hutchinson, we have to have it
Right. We have to have a
now,
conversation.
because we don't get a second bite at that apple. So,
Right.
To the extent we could get those numbers.
Yeah. We've started work on some of that just to get a sense of what even might be worth talking about or might make some sense. I do believe we could have that work completed by the next meeting if we wanted to have that conversation.
I think we have to.
Yeah.
They're still making decisions. Let me go back here.
Well, and as I recall, there will be
All right.
some additional capacity at Hutchinson.
All right.
Because
All right. So let me
current building,
here.
as we
Just give you a little bit of editorial on what I think is going on. So Victor asks, the proposed changes, how will the tax plan affect us who live in Pelham, and so this project? And I think what Victor is basically saying is, this is a significant capital project, and you're alluding to the Trump Republican tax plan, which is in the process of being reconciled in Congress. So there's a lot of moving parts, Victor, and nobody knows exactly how this whole thing is going to land. It's not crystal clear yet whether the AMT is going to be in the final law or out of the final law, whether there's going to be some allowance for mortgage interest deductions, whether there's going to be some or no allowance for the state and local tax deductibility. Nobody knows. All that stuff is a big unknown. It is for sure something is going to happen. It's highly likely, better than 90%, that something is going to happen. It's going to adversely affect blue states like New York, and it's going to impact schools. Now, on the other side, there's this whole other range of uncertainty because this school board does not know yet what choices it's going to make. I've been listening for an hour and a half online, and they're talking about making additional classrooms in Prospect and possibly, but not necessarily, redistricting and constructing a new Hutchinson school. And those are substantial projects, and they're going to cost something to do. So the tax impact is going to be substantially magnified by the choices that are being made at the federal level that impact the deductibility and mortgage interest deduction. So the impact financially has the potential to be very significant. That doesn't mean not to do it, but it is clearly a concern to this Board of Education.
Particularly if we're doing other things in the district that potentially alleviate that problem with some certainty, not necessarily exactly in the window. We still need a plan, an immediate term plan to address that. But in terms of planning for the long term, it seems to me that we would want to look at it.
Okay.
Be fully apprised of what our options are before we recommend to the community a particular solution.
Well, not to mention, we don't
Seems
know if
fiscally
or when
conservative.
we could even acquire a property.
Correct.
And that's, I've been thinking about this, and the more I think about it, the only thing that we're sure we could do is to put something on to put the money aside or authorize us to spend a certain amount of money for a property. Do we know a property will come on? We don't. There are obviously opportunities that may occur. Do we know we're going to be able to buy it? We don't know.
Now that's another thing.
We
There's
don't
a
know if
there's
they'll
a
give us an option
land
of
acquisition
whether
component
it's
to
gonna
this
be money
overall
that they
plan.
will get regardless
That's
of
what
whether we
that
buy
guy
it.
right there is Tom Imperato. He's one of the board
But the
members.
other thing is,
And what he's referring
to
to
my
is that
mind,
part of
and
this
the real
plan
thing
seems
that
to
I
be
struggle
to
with
purchase
is that
land
even if we
to
bought
expand the
the
school.
property, we'd have to come out with another bond that we're currently saying is around $13 million. And will that get approved to do whatever we're going to do there? And I'm more or less coming to the conclusion that maybe, we look at Colonial in different ways, and one of the things was a magnet program, was, some type of thing there that would attract people or make it for a specific use, that we could limit the use of it.
Can you define, I don't want to interrupt you, I just want to make sure you clarify, Tom, I think people use that term in different ways. You say magnet program.
Programs.
Can you
Be like a Spanish immersion
can you
program.
tell people what you're thinking about?
Oh, I'm not thinking about having Krista come in and give a philosophy class, but
Although, that would be excellent.
it would be good to start the kids at that age thinking in a philosophical and logical way. I'm thinking that maybe that's the music center for the district, where there's, we have since.
I don't know what he's talking about. I've always thought that the purpose of a magnet school was to attract white people to go to school in the black part of town. So I don't know how you do that in a place like Pelham, which is like 96% white. I don't understand what you're getting with this magnet school thing. I guess maybe because right now we have neighborhood schools that are defined by the physical neighborhood, and each neighborhood goes to its own elementary. So maybe what he's saying is create a plan where there's a magnet school where you could cross elementary school boundary lines to go to that one school. Maybe that's
this level. No one else goes there. You get zoned, either you're given an option to go out. And that our solution should be looking at something at Prospect, where we put a wing on that will enable us to move the district offices into the basement there, sorry, to put all of you in the
Do not
basement.
mind.
To move the district offices there, that maybe we could do that work with our
Amy,
people.
welcome back.
And save some money on doing that rather than building it into a new school. Even if we only build, for 3 classrooms now and construct the building in a manner that it can be added to.
So if you tuned in just recently, what Tom and
Well,
Parag
I'm
was
saying
talking
that
about,
you really
these
can't
guys are trying to find
other than bring people, other than take
administrative
out,
space, special education.
take out one of the
They
special
wanna
ed
have
classes and move it
music,
to the
true music
Hutchinson
rooms
School,
rather
or
than
to
music on a
Prospect.
card. They're
And
trying
there
to
is capacity
figure
at
out
some
ways
so I think
to,
we do have to look
skin
at,
this cat.
like you brought up that point before, we have to look at those 2 schools that are so close together
Mm-hmm.
as possible options for each other, in whatever way it may shake out. whether it's
And
with
the
different
theme that
programs
keeps
that
coming
run
up
or,
again and again is that there's going to have to
putting
be,
one
at
section
least
of the grade that's
what I'm
particularly heavy that year at
inferring, is that they seem to keep coming
My
back to
impression
this
is that
notion that
that's
there'll have to
been
be
done on a
some
voluntary
degree of
basis in the
redistricting
past,
in order to
and
accommodate
with
these.
reasonable success and minimal friction. That's, Tom, I think, I was brand new to the community at the time, but I think you lived through a couple of iterations of that. I think that's something that's a feasible approach.
I think the only way we're going to.
When you say magnet program, though, would you stop it from being an elementary school as it exists now?
It would, maybe not.
A lot of
It was
times, you can-
proposed-
magnets can be a school within a school. A magnet program can often be a school within a school, so you wouldn't have to stop it from being a regular elementary, you would just draw.
Okay, I get it.
No, I'm just
So
trying to figure out how
magnet
that
is a
impacts the
different thing.
capacity.
Magnet
Like,
school
You would
in this
ideally,
context is a
basically, you would
school
draw
that's
a
got-
class's worth of students from the district as a whole.
she
It was
just-
proposed at the
superintendent
Colonial
just
Town
did
Hall
what-
as a
what-
possibility of
what-
something that the new
So
Hutchinson could do for the Colonial Capacity District-wide.
So what Imperata was saying is maybe one school could be a magnet school, and the superintendent elaborated that maybe it could be a magnet program, and the idea is you could create an area under one of the elementary schools where you could attend that school regardless of where in the district you live. That's and a mechanism to somehow alleviate overcrowding in one school or another. That's
I love the idea, but that's also a long-term
But I think our
solution.
short-term solution, our short-term problems are what they are. We're going to have to be creative in the short term to get to any construction. I think that's to your point too. That some will be faster than others.
I think that's why I'm inclined to say that, a Prospect addition could perhaps get us to at least taking one of the classes out of Colonial sooner than a new Hutchinson or even redistricting,
Why would we put it in a new Hutch, Jess? I don't want to belabor the point, I didn't understand it.
I'm under the impression I might be wrong, that an addition may take less time than a full new building. I might be wrong, but
Yeah, and
Maybe about a
we'd have
year
to-
off,
professional.
year and a half, yeah.
Yeah, professional.
but that could,
opinion on
that makes a difference when all the things are getting added as
that.
push-ins at
And
Colonial
that goes
right
back
now.
to the staging of multiple projects at the same time.
Right.
If it could be staged, it's a smaller project, if you could stage multiple projects at
Maybe a
once,
nice
you could
recap on
have
what
that
they're
up
doing.
and running
What the current shape
more
is.
quickly than a full building versus do they have to be stage one after the other to manage it.
Amy, you
So,
guys are able to hear me now?
that
Do you hear
into
me okay?
construction.
And also from a district perspective, to have, one thing that we're losing, I'm advocating for pulling the special class out of Colonial, not because I want the class out. I think it's very additive to the culture at Colonial. It'll be a humongous loss for Colonial to take that program out. It's something that's great for students all the way around. Students who are slower at reading in the regular classes are going in and reading to the students in that program and feeling really great about it. So this is not about removing that program from Colonial and just for the sake of it. But it does seem like a real opportunity to ease some of the crowding. And I think when you look at the district in terms of putting some of these special programs, if you were also to add it to Prospect Hill along with TSP, then you're not adding all the special education, really specific classes, the real specialized classes to one building. And I think also from a district perspective, that's a healthier balance.
So just to kind of wrap us up for tonight, because I think we've got our marching orders from this one, looking at cost of reconfiguration, getting construction folks here to talk about the realities of staging and oversight and management of multiple projects. renovation, reconfiguration costs, furniture, more information on what that is, what is bondable, what is not, at what scale, and what's a rough idea of cost. A
And
better
aidable, right? And
aidability,
yeah.
right? Science labs, better understanding of the prioritized needs around science.
Maybe the principals could be here to just to help us with that.
I'm thinking Tom too. Tom Callahan would be a good one.
Oh, okay.
Could we? And the challenge with that, and I was a principal, and I love our principals. They see the view from their corner of the world.
Right.
So if we're trying to figure out the grants, not that I'm saying we shouldn't invite them, but the challenge will still be for the board to decide in the grand scheme overall priority.
Right.
So
Perhaps a revisiting of, sorry.
But yeah, more detail. I think that's really what I heard is we need more detail.
And maybe we
Priorities
get asked for a volunteer of one or two science teachers who use the rooms to come in and tell us.
I'd just be as happy to have him convey that info to Cheryl or Tom and have that. Because just from a, keep in mind, we're going to have a lot to decide next week, Tom.
Yes.
Because then questioning takes a while. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't mind getting that information secondhand. You're smiling because you know.
Because I gave him a look.
Stop adding time to the meeting, I know.
And then also the enrollment data, so to explore what might be reasonable, feasible options. Is that
And what was that last one?
just more data. We're working on that data analysis
Sections
of
properties.
And I'm sorry,
properties and
yeah.
enrollments based on where families
I have a
are.
question.
And we're also going to look at the we're
Would
going
you
to
be
have
able to
the
take me to this
architect
food
look
court
at
thing,
the
volunteering thing?
prospects to
after
see
track
the
tomorrow at
other
City
options.
Hall, no shell?
I missed it on the list. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And the economies of scale.
I discuss all these things in the
Right.
When I come home like 5.
Put it back together again.
I just really can't. I don't want to miss
And
track.
I mean, I think that we,
4 o'clock.
5 o'clock, City Hall, no shell. Me, you, Toyota, whip.
I'll talk to you after this meeting.
options A, B, C, D, E, and
Yeah.
F, and a new
And
school.
we're going to have to vote on that.
Okay, as much as it's doable, we will do.
Right.
And we will need to, just for the sake of completing this, I put in some letters based on kind of where I was hearing us talk. Prospect Hill classrooms, and please, if you want it changed, by all means. I put in high, because it sounds, I'm hearing that there's a recognition of a capacity problem, and it is going to happen.
Yeah, in the same way that
Within-
we put the same letters last time at Colonial. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think it's
Which
just a reflection
kind
of
of
the
follows.
reality of where we are.
Right, and then I put in for the accessibility, the only one we didn't have in was the
So they're-
urgency.
they're
And I
assigning
think that,
priorities
almost like
to
some of the others, is
various
going to follow suit with
potential
whatever other
solutions.
decision we make, so it's almost a academic exercise on that. So, okay, and I guess I'm going to recommend maybe that we bring this part of the conversation to close so we can get to executive session business.
Okay.
And thank you all for, and what I'll do too, I'll put some numbers in the other spreadsheet and send those home to you on Friday too, to get a sense of, based on what I'm seeing here, what that might look like numerically.
Terrific. All right. Do I have a motion to recess the public meeting and reconvene in executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Why are they
Great.
going
Do
to
you want
executive?
to give us a reiteration of, well, not reiteration,
Pre-
tell us a pre-iteration of what we
The
Board
reason
will
that's
meet
going
in
to
executive session to discuss
There.
collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law
There we go.
and the employment of a particular person and/or corporation.
There they go. They're going to
All
go
in
talk
favor.
about contracts and specific
Aye.
employment problems.
Any opposed? Okay.
That's it. They're going into executive session.
That was a nice.
Which means that the public session is over and the rest of this meeting will be conducted behind closed doors and outside of the public view because they're going to be discussing matters which under open meeting laws they are allowed to discuss in private, usually related to labor negotiations and lawsuits and maybe even issues, employment issues regarding specific people, which we obviously don't want to discuss in public. So what you've been watching here, folks, I appreciate you coming in here, and hello to the Future Society. what you've been watching is the Pelham, New York Board of Education, and these guys have been discussing in extremely granular detail specific capital improvement projects that they want to make happen around the district. I don't think they came to any conclusions tonight, although they did kind of assign priorities to building new classrooms, additional classrooms at Prospect Hill, and some other specific things. But I think this board is really grappling with a number of capacity issues and desire to modernize some very, very old buildings. Now, one thing I did not hear, and in fairness, I didn't watch the entire meeting, but I didn't hear the specific discussion around the building replacement of Hutchinson Elementary School, which I thought in the town meetings that I attended, that was really the cornerstone of this capital project. I assume that is sort of still on. But of course, the board is under immense pressure and in a very challenging environment because the United States Congress passed this diabolical tax plan, which is being reconciled between the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate right now. But it's going to adversely impact public education and health care and housing subsidies and all kinds of ways in which politics and government come together in our lives, especially in blue states like New York, because this is a very highly taxed area. This is Pelham, New York, and Westchester County, which is the highest real estate taxed county in the United States of America. So the reason why that matters is because this tax plan has one of its cornerstones is to reduce or eliminate the mortgage interest deduction, to reduce or eliminate the deductibility of state and local taxes. That means that it could potentially, just like that, cost more to live here. So as this Board of Education deliberates, and they're trying to solve big problems with capacity and so forth, and aging infrastructure, they're under a double vice grip of pressure because they have to borrow money to pay for those capital projects, and it's like a double dose on the backs of taxpayers because there's less to work with if you don't have a tax deduction for state and local taxes or mortgage interest, because most people do have mortgages. So that's it, folks. Thank you for tuning in. This is my internet channel. It's called Red Blue Talk. I would love it if you click the subscribe button or follow Red Blue Talk. If you're looking at this on Facebook Live, if you're looking on YouTube, youtube.com/Red Blue Talk, subscribe and turn on that little bell icon so you get notifications when I do live streams or I upload new videos. Now, I try to live stream on Wednesday nights, and then again, I upload something on Sunday afternoons at around 5 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the comments and the questions, and good night, everybody. Enjoy.